From the banks of Dewey Lake, it's the Dewey Pod Monster.
All right, welcome back. My name is John, and this is the Dewey Pod Monster Podcast. This is your weekly podcast about consumption. With me this week, as always, is my co-host Sean. He is the Lord and Master of the Draft Therapy YouTube channel, which makes him the authority on Michigan craft beer, as well as the Lord and Master of YouTube in general. Sean, how are you doing today?
I am the master of my own domain. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. It's been a weird day. I had to scrape a dead cat off the parking lot ground at work today with a shovel, so that was fun.
How flat was it?
Well, the cat's body wasn't very flat, but its head was very flat, so I'm not quite sure how to respond to that.
Okay. Well, that's a little grimmer than I thought we would be going so early in the podcast.
He must have gotten into the stuff, so
Yeah. Couldn't get enough.
could not get enough.
Maybe the stuff got out of him. Maybe that's what the problem was.
It must be the strawberry flavored stuff because it wasn't the same color.
No.
But it could be. What have you been up to this week?
Not too much. The kids went on a little camp retreat thing, so they were actually gone overnight for about 5 days. And the wife and I checked out various places such as Blake's Hard Cider Mill place. I don't know exactly what the name is, just Blake's Tasting Room in Armada. Went to Northville, checked out some stuff. Went to Detroit, checked out a couple places. Out to Ann Arbor, and that was the end of our week. I didn't get anything done.
Where'd you end up going downtown?
We went to the Detroit Shipping Company, had the Bangkok 96 street food, which
Yeah.
I've been to Bangkok
They're
96 in Dearborn Heights or Dearborn. I'm not sure which one it is right there, but several times. So this is the first time getting out to the street food place, and had the pad thai kind of roll, which was actually really good. That would be worth the trip to go down there just for whatever reason, like anytime. And then we went to the Slip, which is in the Belt area, that little alleyway next to like the Z Lot and whatever else is over there. It's like a little tiki inspired cocktail bar, and had a couple beers there and called it a night. Thought about going to Brew
really
Detroit, but it was a little bit, it had a few too many drinks to probably do that safely, so just headed home.
Fair enough. I really like the shipping container. What's funny is the Bangkok 96 is like the only food place I really like in there, but it's just a cool spot to go hang out, so kind of doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's right behind 8 Degrees Playdome. I've been to 8 Degrees several times and always saw the building, was like, oh, that looks kind of cool, but it also, that area hasn't really built up yet much, so it's kind of,
right.
You see all this stuff and all these people spending all their money, and then like 2 blocks away, they're like homeless people hanging out in the street, and you're kind of like, well, this feels kind of weird. But the shipping company itself is really cool. I mean, the spot, like you said, it's really cool. It's got a big open air space to it, and they have the volleyball behind it, which again, kind of weird juxtaposition between that, what's going on just outside the surrounding area. But I think the time we enjoyed the most was either Detroit or Ann Arbor. Getting out to Ann Arbor and went to Jolly Pumpkin for the first time in Ann Arbor for me, and went to the Grotto and Bill's Beer Garden, which I hadn't been to before. That's a place that I'd always wanted to go to, but just had never actually got to it. So that's a cool spot too.
I haven't been to the Grotto since I worked down there, so going on, probably 4 or 5 years now. Definitely a cool spot that I need a day where I can kind of line up a couple places that have weird hours and just kind of spend a day out there and have someone drive me home. Lining all 3 of those things up could be tough, because I'd really like to get down there and get to hit Mothfire and Holmes in the same day. And I know that's way easier said than done, just because they both have kind of sketchy hours. And for me, like, Ann Arbor's just far enough of a drive that it's not easy to just pick up and go to.
Yeah, we went the day that they were setting up all the tents for the street fair. So it was nice that enough of the spots, there weren't enough, it wasn't super crazy busy, but it was busy enough that it was a little bit difficult to find parking, but the streets were all kind of closed in the downtown area. So it was nice to just be able to walk through the streets and just not have to worry about fighting your way through crowds. Like, I couldn't imagine going for the art fair, because that would have been nuts. So I'm glad we did it ahead of time.
We used to go down to the art fair every year when we could, just because it was a good excuse to kind of go and sweat out 30 pounds of water weight and, check out some fun stuff. But they had the art fair going on this weekend, then they had Michigan Beer Fest going on this weekend, and I can't even imagine trying to drive in and out of Ann Arbor on a weekend like this. Seems like you're asking for annoyance.
Well, yeah, because the art fair and the beer fest, I mean, they're Ann Arbor and Ipsy, but Ann Arbor and Ipsy kind of are so kind of interconnected.
You can throw a rock from one and hit the other.
Yeah, it would be a nightmare. I didn't get to the beer fest again, but I think we kind of talked about it, and I don't know. I think I didn't get any FOMO this year because I didn't look at Instagram very much. And when I did look at Instagram, I was like, what is this app? Oh, wait, this is what Instagram looks like now.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of their new update. It kind of sucks. So.
Yeah, I'm just far enough removed that it's almost a completely different app. And it's only been about a month, I think, since I posted last or checked out any feed or anything.
Yeah, well, I'm lucky enough to draw that responsibility for this show, so you're not missing anything.
Yeah, I'm very thankful for that. That's one part I don't want to really have too much involvement in. I did watch a couple movies and shows and things. I watched Showbiz Kids, which is a Alex Winter documentary. Alex Winter, a.k.a. Bill from Bill and Ted. He's Bill, right?
I think so.
Ted is Keanu Reeves.
The not Keanu Reeves one.
Right. So. Yeah, he's done a lot of really great documentaries. This one was about basically kids in show business. They follow a kid that's trying to get into show business. They talk to a couple actors that were famous as child actors. They didn't really get into much of the kind of bad side of it. They did kind of talk about some of the, like the child abuse, sexual abuse kind of things, but it didn't get too dark. They had Evan Rachel Wood on there, a couple other people that now for some reason I'm totally drawing a blank.
I caught up on that Undertaker bio that you watched. I think we talked about it last week. Mm-hmm. And that's, A&E, for a lot of what they do, I feel like they kind of put half of a good show together, then kind of shit the bed on the second half of whatever they're doing on a pretty regular basis. So far with these WWE series, both the first and I guess the second season now, they've really done a good job with these little documentaries on them. Like, they're all pretty enjoyable. And I saw the Goldberg one's up now, so I'm going to probably catch that by the end of the week.
I did get a chance to watch the Goldberg one, like you just mentioned. That was pretty good. I didn't realize, I knew him from WCW. Like, I didn't really follow him much when he was in WWE, but I thought he had a good run, but I didn't realize that he would have such an impact in wrestling that he would be in, for what it's worth, the WWE Hall of Fame, and that they could do a whole biography about him. He had an interesting pre-wrestling career as a football player, a college football star, and had his time in the NFL and the CFL, I think, or World League too. I think he was in World League. So I don't know. It's just kind of interesting. I didn't really realize that he was such like a mainstay of WWE, because I kind of fell off wrestling once that whole merger thing happened where they bought WCW. But the new one just aired. I think must air on Sunday nights. The Bella Twins, which I really don't know anything about, so I might take or leave that one. I don't know
who that is. See, what's funny about Goldberg is I always think of him like I didn't realize he was actually a wrestler until after seeing Universal Soldier, and he's got a Christmas movie where he plays Santa, but he murders people.
Yeah, Santa
Slayer.
Yeah,
yeah.
They show parts and clips of that movie in that biography of him.
Do they? Well, that's entertaining. So I always recognize him from that. I was like, oh, this guy's that makes sense that this guy would be a wrestler. He's huge and psycho. So that's kind of fun. But yeah, I can't think of him. I can't ever was he the one that actually was a, Olympic wrestler at one point, or am I thinking of someone else?
You might be thinking of Kurt Angle.
Okay. Yeah. So I didn't really watch him much as a wrestler either. Like I said, I knew him more from some not that good movies, and then I was like, oh, he is a wrestler. Well, that makes sense.
Yeah, he did a lot of shows on, I don't know, about cars. I don't even know what, maybe Speed Channel or something about, they had a monster truck named for him. I don't know if it was named after him or for him, but they had that whole angle. So he was big into motorsports, or at least motorsports TV for a limited amount of time. And he just came back for, I don't know if it was just one match. They kind of cover it in the documentary, but I wasn't really clear on if it was like a one-time thing, if you just came back for one match, if it was a continuing storyline. But I think at this point he is retired.
He seems like the kind of guy that would be big into those Fox Racing shirts and stuff like that. Yeah. So motocross, all that. Yeah. Past that, I didn't catch a whole lot this week. I tried watching this movie called Jersey Shore Massacre, and that was so bad that even I turned it off. I was fully it's actually produced by one of the cast members from Jersey Shore. I was like, well, this will be good. They'll basically have knockoff Jersey Shore people get murdered. And I didn't even get to the murder. Like, I was that annoyed with these characters by within 30 minutes. I'm like, I don't even care that you're going to die. I just want to turn this off. So that's pretty bad.
Yeah, it's pretty bad when you can't even like sit through the first death in some horror movie. Even if it's something that you want to watch, but it's just so bad, you're like, no, I'm good.
I'm not really sure I wanted to watch it. I just didn't really want to look for anything else. And I was like, well, it's got Jersey Shore and Massacre in the title. It can't be all bad, right? And no, it's all bad. But other than that, like, I didn't really catch up on much this week. I kind of got stuck doing a whole bunch of like regular adulting things, which, that's always fun. But I did find time to watch one movie this week, which is really going to be our topic for the week. Segue. So this week we, as promised in the last episode where we spent, I don't even know how long complaining about things, we are talking about the Black Phone this week. So for those who aren't really familiar with it, the Black Phone is it's listed as a 2021 movie, but it just came out within the last month or two. It's at least just getting really talked about in the last month or two. The very short version of the synopsis for this movie is that there is a serial child killer on the loose, and he abducts kids and keeps them in a soundproof basement. And the main character of this movie figures out how to fight him, basically. And there's some twists and turns, and we'll get to that, but I don't want to go through and ruin it right off the bat. Kind of real high level on it. Before we get into anything plot wise or story wise, how did you feel about this one, or what did you think about this one?
Well, first off, I have to mention that I watched this in my bedroom, in my bed, with earphones in, right? So my wife was trying to sleep when I first started to watch it, and she had like a, eye mask on or whatever, so the light wouldn't bother her. And she at some point woke up maybe 10 to 15 minutes into the movie. I could see that she was watching the movie, but I didn't have subtitles on. She didn't hear anything. And by the end of the movie, she could accurately describe to me, like without knowing anything about the movie and just watching it silent, she was able to tell me major plot points and what was going on in the movie with pretty good accuracy. Like, she didn't know the characters' names or anything, but I was so...
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Yeah, I don't know either, but I was really impressed that she could watch it with no auditory information or any information subtitle wise to know what was going on dialogue wise and be able to tell me accurately what the movie was about. So I feel like this movie is it's almost like there are two movies in here. Like, not necessarily that there are two plots, because there is just one plot, but the way that it's shot and the way that it's acted before the main character gets into the realm of the serial killer, I feel like that movie, some of the actors are just plain bad. Like, some of the dialogue's bad, some of the acting just seems really wooden and stiff. Like, you can almost tell, or it almost seems like they're directly reading a cue card as they're talking to the other person. It's just really stilted and really just odd. And I have to say that this movie has, some people that you might recognize. Ethan Hawke plays the main bad guy.
I don't know if you would recognize him. You barely see his face in the movie.
But you can kind of recognize his voice, I think. It's kind of like gravelly. Yeah. And I knew going into it was Ethan Hawke, so maybe that's why I say
that helps.
Ethan Hawke. Yeah, right. Definitely helps. And Jeremy Davies is in this movie. He's been in a ton of different stuff. He's that guy. And I always get him confused with the kid that was in E.T. for some reason. Like, they don't really look all that much. I guess they look a little bit alike, but Henry Thomas, I think, is the other guy. And Jeremy Davies is this guy. They both have like near two first names. I mean, Davies isn't really a first name, but you could say whatever. Whatever. Henry Thomas has really blue eyes, and this guy has brown eyes, and that's really the way that I could tell they're two different people. But I just felt like I said, it seemed before the abduction, we can say that because that's in the trailer. Yeah. It just seems really schmaltzy and like almost soap opera-y. Like, it has that kind of look to it. That's what I thought watching it. I was like, oh, this is kind of really, really like thin, really thin layer of story going on in the first part. And the second part is where it really starts to take off. And this is classified as what is this classified
I'm seeing it as a horror thriller.
I don't even think it's that much of a horror movie. I mean, it is a thriller.
I don't either.
but I didn't find it like
I think it's
anything
more
in
of a
it.
suspense movie.
Yeah, there wasn't anything in it that I thought was really scary at all.
No. So to kind of piggyback on what you're saying, as a counterpoint, I agree with you that there's a lot of bad acting in the first act of this. However, the two main characters, Finney, which is the kid who ends up getting abducted, and his sister Gwen, I think both those kids are about as good as you can get for kid actors in a movie like this. I think they both do a really good job and kind of overachieve for what this movie is.
I have to disagree. I think that Finney is probably in the first part, like I said, the first act, he's probably one of the worst actors, I think, in this movie. I mean, the kid who plays his friend Robin, who's like the tough guy, he just doesn't come across like maybe it's not so much that the acting is that bad, but they just seem miscast. The beginning of the movie starts, I don't want to get too into the weeds on this, but the beginning of the movie starts with like a baseball game. And the kid, Finney, the main character, he's the pitcher, and he loses the game. He like blows the game to this kid. He gets him down 2 strikes, and he gives up this, like, I don't know, it was a game-winning home run or a good hit.
Something like that.
That, like, the other team wins. And nobody, like, berates this kid, his teammates. Everybody's like, hey, good game, good game. If that would happen in real life, your teammates would be really mad at you if at the end you blow the game. And the kid who is hitting against them, they don't seem to know each other, but they do know each other. It just seems like the kid that plays the tough guy, Robin, he seems like he would not be. He's like this scrawny little kid. It just feels really miscast, I guess. It feels like the actors aren't that great, and the roles that are cast for this are just really miscast.
All right. So I'm going to kind of pause here on it for a second, because I don't know how much further we can go into talking about this movie without getting in. I don't think we're going to spoil this movie to the sense where it's going to ruin the movie or anything. But if you're really just like want to watch this movie without knowing a whole lot going in, this is where we're going to start going a little more into plot and more thoughts on this movie. So just be warned with it. To me, the biggest thing I could say about this movie, and hear me out on this, I think this might be the best Stephen King movie that we've seen in quite some time. And that's coincidental because his kid's the one who wrote the book that the movie's based on. To me, everything about this movie plays like a stereotypical Stephen King movie. It moves kind of slow, the way things kind of present themselves and the way they kind of like explain and highlight little details from start to finish in the movie. It just oozes Stephen King to me, which is, there's some exceptions, but in general, not my favorite vibe. And I feel like this was very much so trying to shoehorn it into that kind of vibe of a movie. There's a lot of things that do work in this movie, but for me, like, you know, I've said plenty of times before, like, I usually try to watch everything that we talk about at least twice on this. I had no desire to go back and watch this a second time. I was like, I don't feel like I missed anything in this, or that there's anything that really needs an over the top amount of thought to really talk about it. The movie's fine for what it is, but it just, to me, feels like another Stephen King story that's kind of thrown into a roughly 2-hour format and put up on screen.
It feels like everything is really paint by number almost, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's not, it doesn't seem like there's any hidden undertone. Like everything's very face value. You have the calls on the black phone from who they're from, and
we can go over that. I mean, that's in the trailers too.
Yeah, but I don't want to get into like who exactly. The kid gets calls on the black phone that gives him clues on how to get out or things to avoid.
Yeah,
and they just basically show you the thing. You know, he does the thing that they tell him to do, and the next day passes, and he gets another call, and then he tells them what to do. You know, he gets told what to do, and he does that, and then the next call comes, and he gets told what to do, and he kind of figures it out, and then at the end, all the things that he has worked to come to a culmination. And I don't want to talk really any more in depth about what that is, because I'm very much like spoiler sensitive. But it's just paint by number. It's very surface level. There's not a lot of hidden undertone stuff. And like you said, I didn't have any desire to watch it again because I didn't feel like I missed anything. There wasn't anything I was like, hey, why? How did the, and maybe in a way that's good. Maybe it's good that there aren't a whole lot of open ends, I'm not going to say that there are no plot holes or there are no like things that are just, they don't make any sense. But in the universe, in what we are presented, it's very straightforward. There's no real surprises.
Yeah. Now, some positives to it. I'm going to tack a positive with a negative. Although I don't know how accurate it would be, because I feel like the costuming for the grabber or for Ethan Hawke's character is almost like ahead of its time. Like, I really feel like they tried to shoehorn in this like 70s vibe. And this is kind of a drawback just based off like the pop culture landscape right now that we're in is so Stranger Things heavy, which means it's so 80s heavy, and just trying to cram down that nostalgia like to the umpteenth degree every time you turn around. And it kind of felt like, okay, I've seen the Stranger Things thing enough lately. Like we're back in the, again, I'm assuming it's the 70s at this point.
I think it's early 70s actually, or mid 70s.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they tell you in the first screen of the movie or something like that. It's really, really pushing hard on that. But that being said, although I'm not sure his whole mask and the whole thing that's going on with that fits the time frame, I think it's a really cool like look and costume that they gave Ethan Hawke for this. I love that basically the bottom plate of the mask kind of interchangeable to match whatever weird emotion he's trying to convey in each scene. I thought that was really well done, and it's a great costume because it's, at the end of the day, it's a really simple costume, but it's really effective too. It works really in every iteration that you see of it, from basically once we're into this basement all the way up until the end of the movie.
One thing I really loved that they did stylistically, before you ever really get a look at even the grabber in the mask, when he does the abductions, they will show like these little clips of how the kid got abducted, or these kids get abducted, and they never really show what he looks like. He's always real dreamlike, really hazy, really smeared, or just like really hard to decipher.
Character.
What's that?
It looks like a Tim Burton character, basically.
Yeah, almost, but it's just the shimmer, like the look. And I do think that it really works in the storyline, really plays into this whole 70s thing. It's not, I don't feel like it's shoehorned into the 70s. I like that the way the kids act and the way the kids kind of get around, like even outside of Finney, but other kids, it's the 70s, you know, parents didn't, and the 80s too. I'm a child of the 80s and the early 90s. Parents didn't helicopter kids like they do now. We didn't have cell phones, so kids would be out, basically get out of the house after breakfast, don't come down till dinner time or the sun goes down, right? You could just kind of go out and have your lay of the land, have your little adventures. And the kids are gone for a little bit, and you feel like they're legitimately just out and enjoying life. The home life for Finney isn't great, but it feels very much like a 70s environment. You couldn't really do it in modern times because, again, everybody's watching what their kids are doing, for better or for worse. You know, cell phones, keeping track of your kids. I mean, my kids don't even go to the school like 3 blocks away unless they tell me that's where they're going, and they tell me when they get back. And that's not even something that I've instilled in them. That's just something that they do. So it doesn't feel like it's a movie that could really work any later. Maybe a little bit later it could do 80s, but like you said, because Stranger Things has kind of capitalized and everything feels like it's 80s now, it's nice to see something that's a little bit older and costume accurate. Like things feel period accurate, even if they maybe aren't necessarily all 100% accurate.
Yeah. You mentioned the parenting part of it, and Jeremy Davies is one of the most interesting characters in this movie because he's a real piece of shit to start this movie, and you really almost sympathize with him by the end of this movie. And I was almost waiting for another plot turn by the end of it, just as some weird like gotcha moment in the movie. And it's probably for the better that that doesn't happen. But you know, he's really like the scenes with the grabber and all that. There's nothing really that, for a horror movie, that horrific that happens in this movie. The worst part of this movie, from like an intensity or like a terrifying standpoint, really happens before Finney's abducted and when he's at home with his dad. Yeah,
that was the one thing when my wife was watching after the movie. I said, did you watch pretty much all of it? She's like, yeah. And I said, did you see the stuff, the home life, you know, the sister And I guess we should just break into it. The sister has like these visions. She has these dreams that kind of play into helping out with the story later. But the sister
it's like
has
she's
these,
got The Shining.
yeah. And her mom exhibited the
this-
same thing. And the dad wants to protect her because the mom was super depressed and committed suicide because of these visions.
Mhm.
And he doesn't want her to end up like that, but he doesn't do it in a loving way. He does it in like an abusive way. And like you said, by the end, you can kind of see where he's coming from. It's not right. And he should be like, prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law for the abuse that he afflicts on his children. And the kids have to babysit him. Like that's a thing that kind of reoccurs. Like the sister says, I'm going to go spend the night at so-and-so's house. And Finney says, okay, well, I'll watch Dad tonight, whatever to cover for. And he's not a good guy, but you definitely do feel bad for him. He has kind of like a turn of his character. But yeah, it like you said, there is almost, you're almost waiting for the other shoe to drop. Like there's something else that should be happening to this guy and it just goes unresolved. And that's fine. That's probably what would actually happen. Like we wouldn't look into, the kids wouldn't all of a sudden turn their dad in if they hadn't turned him in by now, So that feels accurate too. But he is kind of sympathetic, but like you said, he's not a good guy.
Yeah. And going along with the whole Shining thing, like it's kind of weird in this movie too, that these two cops are turning to this, what is she, like 8-9-year-old girl, and they're just like, their entire investigation is like resting on these visions that she's having.
Finney's 13, and I feel like she might be 11, or she's supposed to be like 11 or 12. I don't think they're that different age-wise.
Yeah, they're pretty close, but okay, he's 13, she's 11, whatever.
Sure.
My point is, if you're a, serial murder investigator, are you really taking all your police work from the kid who has visions up the street?
Yeah. Yeah, they do get a good lead in the middle there that ends up being true, but yeah, it's I don't know how much I would trust a 10 to 12-year-old girl that has visions about doing my police work for me.
No, it's probably not going to hold up in court. Outside of that, I mean, the story, the good things with this story too, like it doesn't really lull too much. It's not like a fast-paced movie. Like it's not, I wouldn't even call it a slow burn. It's a suspense movie. Like I don't think horror is even the right genre for this. I think it's straight up it's supposed to feel like it's like doom metal. It's just like slow and sludgy and kind of going from point A to point B, but it's not really racing. There's only like maybe 2 scenes in the movie that come to mind where there's even a moment where you could potentially say like, oh, I was on the edge of my seat for that, which you're kind of not, because you're like, well, there's still like an hour left in this movie. You kind of know what's going to happen.
Well, it feels like the way the story plays out, it feels like there are elements where it's a race against time. Like he only has so much time once he's been kidnapped, but you don't ever feel like there's really a sense of urgency. It doesn't it is I agree with you 100%. I think that this is, and we said it at the beginning, I don't think it's really a horror movie, and it feels like a suspense or a thriller, but there's not really that sense of suspense or thrill. It's just kind of like, oh, this is going to happen, and you're just a passenger and you're watching this. Whereas there are some thrillers that feel genuinely thrilling. This is not one of those.
Did you ever get the feeling that this movie was going to end the way it did? Like, let's put it this way. Without ruining exactly what happens, did you ever get the impression that, how can I word this?
Tiptoe around it.
Did you ever get the impression that Finney was truly in danger in this movie?
Not really. No.
Yeah, and that's kind of part of what I didn't like about it.
I didn't see the ending coming. Like I didn't see exactly what happened come, the way that they kind of tiptoe around it. But no, I didn't feel like there was really ever any time that he was in real danger. Like if something bad was going to happen, it would have happened. And they need a movie, right? They need a storyline. They need to pad this out for the time. So you kind of, it's, I don't know, it's ironic, right? We watch these horror movies. I think horror movies are a little bit different. Slasher movies, horror movies, it seems like the bad guy is never fully punished. Like there's always somebody that gets out. The movie is the process of trying to figure out who's the one that's going to survive, right? But when you have where it's one-on-one, it's very rare. I don't want to say never. And I'm not going to say if this movie ends like this or not, but I guess you could probably imply it. It never ends where the bad guy wins, or very rarely ends that the bad guy wins.
Not in this kind of
No.
Like, usually if it's something where the bad guy wins, it's typically more of like, this is the action movie where the bad guy wins and we're setting you up for a part 2 or something like that.
Yeah. Or a foreign
where
movie.
with this, yeah, that's a possibility too. But yeah, that's kind of one of the things I didn't like about this too, is like, you know that this character is in like a bad situation, and you know that, forget about what's happening with the black phone. Like, just from where this, what's led up to this point, that this guy is capable of all kinds of horrible things. But you also know, like, there's nothing in this movie that makes me feel like, well, this is going to end it like in a way other than, I'm not going to say exactly what happened, but I was like, there's no way this is going to end other than with the good guy coming out on top and the bad guy having a bad day.
Let me ask you something that I was just kind of thinking about. This movie's called The Black Phone.
Yeah.
It's about this phone. I mean, essentially, boil it very much down. There's someone calling via this phone. You're told immediately when you see the phone that it doesn't work. That don't even bother. It doesn't work. Did you, kind of going in the same point that you were getting at, did you ever feel Finney was in danger? Did you ever really care how the calls were coming through the black phone? Like, did it even matter that it was disconnected to you?
No.
Did you ever wonder who's calling? How are they getting a hold of him?
No.
Yeah, that's kind of it's called the black phone, but you'd hope that they would maybe
I think that's part of the
make
fault
you want
of
to
the
care.
trailer, though.
Yeah, true.
Because I know in the trailer that, or maybe it wasn't a trailer, but I knew going into this movie who was calling on the black phone.
Yeah, same.
Whether it was from a trailer or from something else, I don't remember at this point. But I mean, it's well known going into it, so it didn't really matter when he said the phone doesn't work, blah blah blah. It's like, yeah, well, okay, but this movie's called The Black Phone, so
I've seen in the trailer that the phone rings, so you can tell me it doesn't work, but I know it's going to work at some point.
It's going to have some sort of integral, plot point to this movie, because the movie's called The Black Phone. It's not called The Grabber.
Yeah.
So,
well, that's the thing too. Modern movies, the reason I don't watch a lot of trailers, does a trailer tell you everything? No, it doesn't. But
no.
You know the good, like you mentioned, the good guy's going to win, or you're pretty certain that it will, and they show you in the trailer that the phone rings. Like, it doesn't work, but it rings, and someone's calling this kid. Who are they? Oh, and I think that even in the trailer, I'm not going to watch a trailer right now, but I feel like even in the trailer, they tell you who is on the other end, or they at least hint at it. So
I think they hint at it. I don't think they flat out say it, but I think they give you a pretty good idea of who it is. And truthfully, I mean, they're already talking about making a prequel for this movie, which I think would absolutely ruin the things that this movie gets right, because they're talking about making a prequel where you get to see how this character of the Grabber gets to be the Grabber. I'm like, actually, one of the things I like about it is that there is no real backstory or explanation, that he just kind of is this horrible person. I think that's a stronger character.
Yeah.
But if you were going to do, honestly, I would have had, I don't want to say more respect for this movie, but I would have been way more blown away with this movie if it ended in the exact opposite way of what it did.
Yeah, same. The one thing, not the one thing, but one of the things I wanted to kind of give kudos to, it doesn't even really have anything to do with the movie. It's that opening scene where they show the production, like the Blumhouse Pictures thing, where they fly through the house. They fly through this house, and this is sad that this is like, hey, this is the one thing I really wanted to talk about. But they fly through this house. It's a sequence of all these like horror icons that are in this house, the Blumhouse, that they're kind of showing for the production studio or whatever it's for. But all these little references, I just thought that was like, oh, this is really cool. And they really set up this idea that this was going to be this epic kind of, it kind of got me prepared that it was going to, not necessarily epic, but it was going to be this like on the same kind of line or on the same playing field as some of the movies that they show in there. And then when you see it, you're just there's just not really any horror elements to it. So it's kind of a little bit of a letdown.
Well, I think this movie's also kind of a victim of people just getting way too fucking excited about it. I've seen so many people like talking this movie up as like, get out of the way X and get out of the way whatever. This is the new best horror movie of the year and all this. And, it's not a terrible movie. Like it's fine for what it is. But, when you build a movie up, like currently this movie is ranked number 4 on IMDb, down from number 1. So again, we're in new territory for us. This is a high watermark as far as that goes. But, this movie, to me, like, I don't see any way how this is the most popular movie in the country. Like, right.
Yeah.
And I don't even know what else is really out right now, but I can think of several things that I would probably enjoy as much, if not more, than this. The buildup on this almost, at least for me, worked to this movie's detriment. Me hearing so many good things about this movie and then watching it, I'm just kind of like, yeah, well, this is how Stephen King style stories are told. I'm not really feeling like there's anything that out of the ordinary here. Didn't really help me.
Yeah, I watched the trailer a few times. I think I did get a little hype for it. And I had heard, from the trailer, and just kind of, I wanted to keep myself a little separated after I had already seen the trailer. When I saw the trailer initially, I thought the movie was like a streaming thing, like a on-demand kind of movie. I didn't realize it was going to theaters.
I think it was supposed to be to begin with, and
it got
because I know this movie was, it was supposed to come out in theaters last year, and then last year happened, and we'll just forget about that history lesson for whatever reason. But I guess it did really, really well with test screenings, so they decided to push it back to this year and actually give it a theatrical release as opposed to whatever they were going to do with it beforehand, which is why it's getting, commercially hyped up now.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't really know if I have all that much more to say about this movie, to be honest. I just we didn't get into spoilers. We didn't kind of ruin the movie for anybody who hasn't seen it yet. One thing I wanted to mention was currently, while this is the number 4 movie on IMDb, it is IMDb rated at 7 exactly, 7.0 out of 10 for 57,000 votes or ratings or whatever. That kind of leads me to my rating. I wouldn't go quite as high as a 7. I don't think it's competently made. I do think it's schmaltzy. I do think it's miscast. I think some of the characters are kind of ridiculous. Like I said, the friend Robin, who's supposed to be the neighborhood tough guy. He can beat up anybody, beats up this like Goliath-like kid on the playground, and people just get the kids just beat the shit out of each other, like to the point where they're like just pools of blood. Yeah, brutal, like super brutal,
criminally.
Yeah, but it's the 70s. We got away with stuff like that. So I guess that's another part of it. Like nobody ever says anything. Robin beats this kid up on the schoolyard. He's a bloody mess. The sister hits this kid in the head with a rock. There's like blood pouring down his head. Okay, whatever. But regardless of all that stuff, I would say for me, giving it out of a 10 hot dogs, I would probably give it, maybe I'm going to go a quarter number, because I would generally go halves, but I don't feel like it's quite a 6, and I don't feel like it's quite a 6.5. I'd give it 6.25 hot dogs out of 11 interchangeable mask segments. That'd be my rating.
I'd give it a solid 6. There's, I think there is a large demographic of people that really like this. If you like Stephen King style stories, if you like that kind of, I guess creepiness, again, I hesitate to say the word horror, but I'm sure for some people this is what they think of with horror. If you like that kind of elevated horror, I guess is the new term for it, this probably is something that you would like. I told my wife I think she would like this movie quite a bit. Like it's that kind of story that I think she would find not necessarily scary, but like the right kind of creepy that would kind of draw her in and whatnot. So I think there's a lot of people that I can see why they're enjoying this. I think Ethan Hawke's great in this movie. He, in a lot of ways, pulls the really good acting of being in the movie just enough to make him memorable, but not enough to make you like overkill with him. So there are things that are done really well in this movie, but as a whole, it's a solid 6. It's better than average, but not to the point where I feel any huge draw to watch it a second time or really, in all honesty, talk a whole hell of a lot about it past this episode.
Yeah, I feel like it's competent, like I said, but like you said, there's just nothing really memorable about it. I think I would agree with you 100% about Ethan Hawke. I think he does a great job in the movie. He's in it just enough for you not to get sick of him. He's just there enough to make his presence known.
But he's also not there enough that he has a little bit of mystery around him and a little bit of mystique around him that he leaves you wanting just a little bit more.
Right. And I think that's a perfect horror, or I guess in this case, suspense kind of villain, or a villain in a movie. You don't want him to be running the show, but just enough that you want to see more of them. And I think, like you mentioned way earlier, I think a prequel just, I have no interest in knowing any backstory about this.
No.
It makes it stands so well on its own for what it is. You know, it's like horror light. Like my wife is not into horror at all. And she sat, and like I said multiple times now, she just was able to sit and watch it. And she didn't like, oh, why are you watching this stupid stuff? Or, you know, made some kind of comment. She just kind of let it go. And, you know, she said,
it's not like you're watching Night of the Demons in bed or something like that. So
she's like, I said, is this the kind of movie? Would you like to watch more? She's like, no, I wouldn't want to watch a movie like this again, but it wasn't bad. It's just not my thing. So, and that's kind of how I feel about it too.
Yeah. And I don't think we need to harp on it much past that. It's worth watching. I don't know that I would go pay theater prices to see it, but if you can rent it for $5 or if it pops up somewhere to stream for free, whatever, it's worth that. I think that actually the phrase horror light's probably a really good way to kind of phrase this. I don't know that you would want to, if you were like a younger kid, like a teenager or something, this would be the way to go. But then again, most horror movies that I got into when I was a younger kid kind of revolved around teenagers getting killed. So maybe it's fine. It might be a good kind of starting point for like if you're just getting into the genre. But I also feel like, you know, you're really setting the bar low. This is where you want to have your starting point be. I could think of probably 50 other movies I would rather start someone on that aren't the most intense things in the world, that are just more fun than what this is. All right. So yeah, again, this one, check it out if you want to. Just don't go overboard on the hype train with it. It's worth watching, but we don't want to get you to the point where you're pissed off because it is not Night of the Demons or something like that. In the meantime, we're going to wrap this one. This is a little bit of a shorter go this week. Make sure to follow us, though, on all the socials. We are at Dewey Podmonster. As always, please subscribe, review, leave a message if you want to leave a message. Any comments like that help, so we can help grow this show and find out what we can do better and what we're doing terrible. Let us know. In the meantime, also make sure to check out Sean's social stuff and his other projects. Sean, why don't you go ahead and plug your plugs?
Yeah, you can find me at youtube.drafttherapy.com. That will take you directly to my YouTube channel where I talk about mostly Michigan beer, but I've got a few other not beer things related. I should, by the time this goes up, my video for Mom Water will be up for a couple weeks. And you can see what I think about Mom Water. If you're interested in Mom Water, it's not just for dads. Hashtag dads are cool too. At least that's what it says on the box. And you can find me on all the social media stuff at Draft Therapy.
I am actually interested in Mom Water. I just keep forgetting to buy it. So, all right, guys, you have yourself a great week. We'll be back next Tuesday with a new episode about something else. I don't know what yet, but we'll figure it out. Have a good one. Breathe, John, you dumb fuck.
Not too much.
All right, welcome.
My dad beats me every night. Nobody seems to notice I'm all beat up from that, but that's cool.